Kalen never expected his evening to be interrupted by fire from the sky. He had lived alone for 6 quiet seasons on Veros 6, charting the old rivers, mapping forgotten ruins, and avoiding the noise of crowded colonies. His home, nestled on a hill of bioluminescent grass, overlooked the jungle's edge where light often bent strange and wild creatures called through the dark. It was not a place one stumbled upon by accident. Which is why, when a flaming object tore across the sky, screaming like a wounded beast and vanishing into the canopy with a tremor, Kalen knew something had broken the order of things. He slung his satchel over his shoulder and whistled twice. From the underbrush, a 4-legged creature, his pack beast, Rulo, bounded to his side. Together, they moved toward the plume of smoke curling into the lavender dusk. It took an hour to find the crash site. Trees had been shredded in a wide arc, and embers still clung to scorched vines. Amidst the broken metal and twisted hull plating lay the escape pod, an elegant shard of crystal and alloy, cracked open like a seed. Inside, he found her. She was unconscious, her violet skin streaked with blood and soot, her silver robes torn. Her hair shimmered like moonlight against the wreckage. Instinct made him step back. She was clearly not from this moon. Not even from this system, by the look of her ship. "Are you alive?" he asked gruffly, kneeling beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, the most piercing shade of luminous amethyst. She blinked at him, dazed. Then her lips moved. "Kalen." He jerked back. "How do you know my name?" "I don't." She murmured, confused, "But I know your face." She passed out again. Kalen cursed under his breath, hesitated, then lifted her into his arms. She was far too light. Fragile. Yet there was something unnervingly familiar in the way she had looked at him. "Stars preserve me," he muttered. "This isn't what I signed up for." Back at his home, he laid her on his cot and tended her wounds. Rulo watched from the corner, ears perked. When she finally stirred again, her gaze fixed on the window, where bioluminescent trees pulsed gently in the night. "Where am I?" "My home." "You're lucky your ship didn't burn through the forest." She tried to sit up but winced. I don't remember anything. Except your name. And your face. That doesn't make me feel better. I think I was running from something. Or someone." He sat back. "Well, you found me instead." For days, she stayed. She had no name she could recall. He began calling her Nevia after a word he once heard in a forgotten tongue. It meant, wanderer beneath stars. Nevia explored the jungle edge cautiously, fascinated by the glowing fauna and shimmering leaves. She asked endless questions. Kalen pretended to be annoyed, but he found himself waiting for her laughter. One evening, she traced a faint mark on the back of her shoulder. It glowed softly. "What is this?" Kalen studied it. A sigil, unfamiliar, but elegant. "Royal." "I don't know," he said honestly. But a shadow passed through him. Nevia looked at him seriously. "Do you want me to leave?" He hesitated. "No, but I think one day soon, we won't get a choice." She nodded. Then, quietly, she took his hand. "Then let's make this day ours." And they did. The rain had finally stopped. Kalen stood at the edge of the clearing, staring into the thick green drapery of the jungle. Morning dew clung to the leaves like secrets refusing to let go. The hum of insects returned with the rising sun, their buzzing soft but ever-present, a contrast to the silence that had taken up residence between him and the strange woman who now occupied his hut. Nevia. She sat under the low awning, bundled in one of Kalen's old woven blankets, watching the steam rise from a cup of herbal brew he had left by her side. She didn't drink it yet. Just stared at it. As if trying to remember what it meant to feel warmth. Kalen shifted his weight. He had considered taking a walk alone, disappearing into the jungle again like he used to. But something kept his feet rooted. Maybe it was her presence, so still and fragile. Or maybe it was the flicker in her eyes when she met his gaze last night. Not fear. Not quite trust. Something in between. He sighed and turned toward the interior. He needed to gather roots before the afternoon sun made them sticky and bitter. "I'm leaving for a few hours," he said without looking back. No answer. Just the sound of soft breathing and the chirping of something unseen in the trees. He almost welcomed the silence. Nevia didn't remember falling asleep, but when she woke, the jungle was loud again. Her skin felt damp. Her dreams had been restless, filled with images she couldn't understand. A towering palace with golden towers, a hallway cloaked in shadow, voices screaming her name. Then the fire. Always the fire. She sat up slowly, brushing a strand of tangled hair from her cheek. Her hands trembled. Her back ached again, but not in a physical way. There was something deeper, like her skin remembered something her mind had forgotten. Kalen had left. She was alone. She took the herbal cup, now lukewarm, and sipped. Bitter, sharp. The taste grounded her. The forest outside was impossibly green, brighter than anything she remembered. The colors felt too vivid, as if the world had intensified in her absence. She rose carefully and stepped to the edge of the hut. She needed answers. Kalen returned before midday. The satchel slung across his shoulder was half full with gnarled roots and drying vines. His face was set in a tight, unreadable mask, but his steps slowed as he approached the hut. Nevia was waiting for him. She didn't speak immediately. She stood tall, despite the exhaustion in her limbs, and looked him directly in the eye. "I had another dream." Kalen tensed. "Dreams pass. Not these." She stepped closer. There was a fire. A great hall. And pain. He glanced toward the path that led deeper into the jungle, then back at her. "Dreams don't always lie. But sometimes they confuse." Nevia swallowed. "Something in me is waking. I feel wrong in my own skin." Kalen's eyes softened for the briefest moment. "You should speak with Theory." "Who is Theory?" "A healer. A wise one. She lives 2 ridges over." He dropped the satchel at the hut's edge. "She knows about bloodlines. Symbols. Things not easily explained." Nevia nodded slowly. "Take me to her." Kalen hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he said, "Tomorrow. You need rest." She didn't argue. But neither of them slept well that night. The path to Theory's home wound through narrow ravines, tangled vines, and hanging moss that clung to them like ghosts. Nevia stumbled more than once, but Kalen kept a steady pace. He didn't speak. Not unless necessary. When they reached a grove of crimson-leafed trees, Kalen paused. "This is her boundary. She doesn't like visitors." "Then why are we here?" Nevia asked. He looked at her, eyes hard. "Because you deserve answers." They entered the grove. A low hut, barely visible beneath the canopy, came into view. Smoke drifted from its chimney, sweet and pungent. Theory emerged before they reached the entrance. She was striking, tall and lean with deep red skin that shimmered like polished stone. Her hair was bound in coils, adorned with bones and feathers. Her eyes, bright and yellow like candlelight, narrowed when she saw Nevia. "You brought something dangerous," she said. Kalen bowed his head slightly. "She needs clarity." Theory circled Nevia like a hawk, studying her silently. "She's marked." Nevia flinched. "Marked?" "Show her," Kalen said. Nevia hesitated. Then she turned and pulled her tunic aside, revealing the upper part of her back. The skin was unblemished, save for a faint, shimmering sigil just below her left shoulder blade. Theory stepped closer. Her breath caught. This is royal, she whispered. You bear the seal of the Ember Court. Nevia turned sharply. What does that mean? It means, Theory said, voice now tight with warning, you are not who you think you are. And there are those who will kill to keep that forgotten. Kalen swore under his breath. Nevia felt her knees weaken. She reached out and gripped the frame of the hut. Theory didn't offer comfort. She returned to her fire pit and dropped herbs into the flames. I can help you remember. But memory has a price. What price? Nevia whispered. Pain. Truth. Change. She looked to Kalen, who stood stiff and silent. I need to know, Nevia said finally. Theory nodded. Then stay the night. That evening, while the jungle sang its nocturnal symphony, Nevia lay inside Theory's hut surrounded by strange scents and flickering shadows. Kalen sat outside, eyes scanning the trees like a sentry. Theory burned a pale root that filled the room with a silver haze. Breathe it in, she instructed. Let it open the doors. Nevia obeyed. And the dreams came again. But this time, they weren't dreams. They were memories. A father's voice, deep and commanding. A woman's laughter like chimes. A brother's hand tugging her away from danger. Then fire. Screams. Betrayal. She saw herself on a balcony wrapped in gold, watched a man with violet eyes push her mother to the ground. Then she was falling, through fire, through shadow, through time. When she woke, Kalen was beside her. I remember, she whispered. What do you remember? That I'm not just lost, she said. I was hidden. On purpose. Kalen met her gaze. Then they will come looking. They both turned as Theory entered, her expression grave. The silence between you will not last, the healer said. Not now. You've stirred the past. The jungle will not keep you safe forever. Nevia sat up. Then I need to be ready. Kalen didn't argue. But deep in his heart, he wished she had never come. And deeper still, he was glad she had. The jungle's breath was thick that morning. Mist curled between roots like sleep trying to cling to waking thoughts. Kalen led the way, machete in hand, his silent pace broken only by the occasional murmur of wildlife. Behind him, Nevia followed with careful steps, her eyes not on the path, but on him, always him lately. They had been walking for hours, following the crude map Theory had sketched in the dirt. It led them deeper than Kalen had ever dared go. These were unspoken places. Even Theory, with her red skin and jungle-born ways, had only whispered of Soluin's temple. Nevia's fingers traced the vines along a low-hanging branch. She looked pale today, despite the shimmer of sweat on her face and collarbones. Her dreams had grown stranger, she'd said. Fire-licking marble floors. A man with cruel eyes and a blade half-drawn. Always waking with her hands clutching her back, where the mark lay hidden beneath her tunic. You all right? Kalen asked, slowing as the trees thinned. She nodded, but her voice betrayed the mask. I keep thinking we're being followed. Kalen's jaw tightened. He hadn't told her about the shadows he'd seen the night before, half-shapes in the foliage that vanished when stared at directly. He grunted. We're close. Ahead, the earth sloped upward into stone. Carved into the hillside, obscured by generations of moss and ivy, stood the forgotten doorway, arched and silent. Strange glyphs lined its edges. A symbol above the threshold pulsed faintly as they stepped near, 3 curved lines intersected by a single vertical streak. Nevia shivered. It's warm here. Indeed, the air within the temple's entrance felt like the hush before a lightning strike, heavy, charged. Kalen laid a hand on the stone. Soluin, he called. No answer. Then, a whisper like leaves brushed by wind, come. They passed into the dim corridor, the jungle's green giving way to the cool blues and purples of phosphorescent moss that lined the walls. The space opened into a circular chamber, with a shallow pool at its heart. Mist curled above the surface. Sitting by its edge, cross-legged and motionless, was Soluin. She was green-skinned, her features smoothed by age but ageless all the same. Her long hair was bound in silver thread, and her eyes glowed faintly even as they remained closed. "You bring the dreamer," she said without looking up. Kaelin hesitated, then stepped aside to reveal Nevia. Soluin's eyes opened, bright, liquid green. "You have come far, child." Nevia's voice was barely a breath. "I need to remember." Soluin nodded. "Then drink." She motioned to the pool. Nevia glanced at Kaelin. He gave a single nod. Then, she knelt and cupped the water into her palms. The liquid glowed faintly as it touched her skin. The moment it reached her lips, the world fractured. She stood in a palace of white stone veined with gold. Music drifted on the air, strings and bells, and rose petals fell in slow motion. She wore silk, deep purple edged with crimson, the royal colors of her house. A boy, no, a young man, approached. His eyes were her own, but twisted with arrogance. "Nevia," he said smoothly, "you should smile more. It is your wedding day." She looked past him, to the dais where a throne sat empty. "I don't want this," she whispered. He leaned close. "What you want stopped mattering the day father died." Flashes then. Fire. Screams. Steel on marble. Her betrothed dead on the floor, mouth agape. Her brother's hand raised, blade dripping. "I told you," he hissed, "submit or flee." She had fled. The jungle, a borrowed ship, the starlit crossing, and finally, crashing into a forgotten world. Her knees hit the temple floor. Her sobs echoed. Kaelin caught her as she fell. "Nevia." She gripped his shirt, buried her face into him. "It's true. All of it. I chose exile. I ran. I left them all to die." Soluin's voice was low, a current beneath the storm. "You preserved your soul. That is not cowardice, it is wisdom." Nevia shook her head. "But I split the memories. I couldn't face them. I wanted to believe I was just a survivor, not a traitor to my own blood." Kaelin held her tighter. "You're not a traitor. You're alive. That's worth more than 100 thrones." Her breath trembled against him. "I saw the way you touched the jungle," he whispered. "I saw the way you smiled even when you were afraid. Nevia, you make me want to stay human." She looked up, startled. "Kaelin. I think I love you," he said simply. She opened her mouth. Closed it. "You shouldn't." "Why?" "Because I'm broken. Because I'll burn you like the palace. Because I'm still running. I'm not afraid of fire." They stood there for a long time, the silence between them no longer empty, but filled with understanding, pain, and something tender. Finally, Soluin approached and placed a hand on Nevia's brow. "You have remembered. The question now is, what will you become with the truth?" Nevia stared at her reflection in the still pool. Not a runaway. Not a princess. Something new. Outside, the wind shifted. Far in the jungle, the first of the hunters crossed a line that had not been touched in a decade. They bore sigils not seen since the fall of a house to fire. The past was coming. And Nevia was finally ready to meet it. The twin suns of the jungle moon dipped low, casting amber and violet hues across the canopy. Shadows stretched long, painting Kaelin's outpost in stark contrasts of light and dark. Nevia stood barefoot on the wooden veranda, her violet dress fluttering softly in the breeze. Her eyes were fixed on the sky, but her mind lingered on the man inside. Kaelin's presence was behind her, quiet, steady, a warmth she could feel even when he said nothing. He had been more silent since their return from the temple. Ever since the memories returned. Since she wept in Soluan's arms and whispered secrets she hadn't remembered she knew. She turned. He was watching her from the doorway, arms crossed. "You should eat," he said. His voice was low. Controlled. She offered a faint smile. "I'm not hungry." Kalen gave a small nod. No pressure. That was how he always was, there, steady, respectful. But more distant now. "I can't help but feel like I stole something from you," Nevia whispered. Kalen raised an eyebrow. "What could you possibly have stolen from me?" "My peace," she said. "You were content to be alone before I crashed into your life." He shook his head. "I wasn't living. I was surviving." Before she could answer, the night split with a sonic hum. A small transport vessel, sleek and blue like the royal insignia it bore, descended onto the landing platform across the clearing. The jungle quieted. Even the wind seemed to pause. Nevia's breath caught in her throat. Kalen was already stepping down the porch, hand on the hilt of the blade at his hip. Nevia followed, her pulse thudding in her ears. The vessel's hatch hissed open. From the steam stepped a tall figure, regal, sharp-featured, and unmistakably royal. His skin was a rich, pale blue, adorned with silver markings that shimmered in the low light. He wore the crest of the high house across his chest. "Orin," Nevia breathed. The emissary strode forward with purpose, boots silent on the stone path. He inclined his head. "Princess Nevia. Your people grieve your loss. I have come to bring you home." Kalen stiffened. His jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Nevia's mouth went dry. "You, how did you find me?" Orin's eyes flicked toward Kalen. "With difficulty. Some would not have risked it. But the Queen Mother insisted. She still believes in your return, even after your misjudgments." Kalen didn't flinch, but Nevia felt the insult land. "I'm not ready to return," she said. "You must be," Orin replied. "You've had your freedom. Now it's time to accept your place. The civil unrest your absence sparked has grown. Your brother is pressing claims again. Your mother needs your voice in the council. You are still heir by blood." "I don't want it," she said, more to herself than to him. "You don't have a choice. Unless," Orin paused, glancing again at Kalen. "Unless you'd rather waste away on some forgotten jungle moon with a human hermit who handed your location to your enemies." Nevia reeled. "What?" Kalen took a step forward, confused. "I did what?" "You sent an emergency signal weeks ago," Orin said coldly. "You reported a royal crash survivor. That ping reached half a dozen channels, including ours. That signal was automated," Kalen growled. "I didn't know who she was when I activated it." "So you claim." Nevia stepped between them. "Stop. Both of you." Orin turned his gaze solely to her. "Princess, I implore you. Your people need you. And I was instructed to tell you this: if you do not return willingly, the Queen will assume you are being held here against your will. She will send soldiers next time." Nevia stared at him. Then turned to Kalen. "Is it true?" she asked, voice shaking. "Did you send that signal?" Kalen nodded slowly. "I did. But before I knew anything about you, who you were, where you were from. I thought you were just someone hurt in a crash. I swear it." Tears stung her eyes. "And after? When you found out?" "I shut down every channel. I hid the beacon. You know that. But they still found me." "I'm sorry," Kalen said. His voice broke on it. "I should have smashed the damn thing." A long silence fell. Orin stood like a monument, composed and watching. Nevia turned away. Her thoughts were chaos. The memories Soyuan had helped her retrieve flickered like shards of stained glass. Her brother. The betrayal. Her flight. Her desperate wish for freedom. And now, Kalen, his steady gaze, his quiet kindness, his refusal to hold her back. She walked back into the cabin without a word. That night, Kalen sat alone beside the fire pit. The stars above blinked faintly through the canopy. He held her necklace in his palm, a delicate silver thread with a crystal pendant. She'd left it behind on the table. Footsteps approached. He didn't look up. "I should go," she said softly. He nodded. "If that's what you want." "I don't know what I want." Kalen finally turned. His face was calm, but distant. "Then go find out. You don't owe me anything." "But I owe myself something," she said. He stood, the necklace clutched in his hand. "I'll be here. If you come back." Nevia stepped closer. "They told me you betrayed me. I almost believed it. I'm used to being the villain in other people's stories." She reached for his hand. Closed his fingers around the necklace. "Don't be in mine." Then she turned and walked back toward the emissary's ship. The next day, the transport rose into the sky. Kalen watched from the forest edge. The jungle was quiet again. Empty. 3 days passed. He resumed his routines, water gathering, hunting, journaling. He tried to bury her memory in work. But the scent of her on the blankets, the carved wooden spoon she'd made, the small humming tune she used to sing, all of it haunted him. On the 4th day, the sky opened with another sonic boom. Kalen rushed to the clearing, weapon in hand. But it wasn't the royal vessel. It was a stolen freighter. The hatch opened. Nevia leapt down, hair wild, eyes fierce. "You ran," he said, breathless. "I chose," she said. "For once in my life, I chose something for me." Oren's voice rang out behind her. "You don't have to do this." Nevia turned back to him. "No. I don't. That's the point." She ran to Kalen. He caught her in his arms, and the kiss was raw with fear, joy, and relief. They didn't look back. The jungle swallowed them as they vanished into the green, together. They had no map, no plan. But they had each other. And for now, on a moon not far enough from the past, that was enough. The mist never quite left the cliffs of the low hollow reach. From their stone-woven shelter tucked into the wind-carved ravine, Kalen awoke each morning to the scent of herbs hung in bundles, the sound of water trickling through moss-lined channels, and the warmth of Nevia's body nestled beside his. The jungle beyond had changed little, but they had changed entirely. Weeks had passed since they'd fled. Months, perhaps. Time had softened its edges here. No stars overhead told them what day it was. And they no longer asked. Nevia was no longer the dazed, broken princess who had fallen from the sky. Here, she was barefoot, fierce, and free. But peace, they both knew, was borrowed time. Theory arrived first. Unannounced, of course. She stepped into their haven like she'd always known the way, her red skin cloaked in bark-dyed robes, her sharp eyes taking in every corner of the dwelling. "You're lucky I taught you how to bind a concealment weave," she said flatly, "or the palace hounds would have sniffed you out days ago." Kalen offered her a drink. "You didn't come just to check the drapery." Theory ignored him and looked at Nevia, who sat by the fire plucking seeds from a fruit pod. "You know what they'll do if they find you." "Yes," Nevia said softly, not looking up. "And I don't care." "Then you're not thinking clearly." Nevia rose, her violet skin catching the firelight. "I've never thought clearer. They would have caged me, forced me into a throne I never wanted. I'd rather be no one in this wild corner of the universe than be a crown they polish for parades. They'll say you abandoned your people. They abandoned me first. The room was silent except for the hiss of flame. Then you'd better start building something worth the exile, Theory muttered. Because people will come. More like you. Like him. Misfits. Fugitives. Dreamers. Kalen raised an eyebrow. That's a strange prophecy. Not a prophecy, Theory said, reaching into her satchel and throwing down a glowing crystal. A signal stone. To mark this place as sanctuary. If you'll have it. Nevia looked at Kalen. He met her eyes, then nodded. The first visitor came within days. A green-skinned merchant girl with eyes like moss and burns across her neck. She said nothing at first, just collapsed by their door and clutched her pack as if it were her soul. Nevia took her hand and gave her water. Kalen built her a cot. After her came a child with shifting skin who spoke in humming pulses. Then a mute man who carved wooden birds and slept with them circling overhead like guardians. Each brought pieces. Stories. Pain. And somehow, Nevia made space for all of them. Soluin returned with a caravan of healers and star readers. He brought books bound in leaf hide, medicines made of crushed moon petals, and a telescope made from the bones of a sky whale. He kissed Nevia's forehead in greeting and whispered, "You've made a kingdom where no one kneels." She only smiled. One evening, as a red storm raged above the cliffs, Nevia and Kalen stood on the ridge, cloaked against the wind. "When I was a child," she said, "I dreamed of a throne made of stars." "And now?" Kalen asked. "I want a roof that doesn't leak, a fire that doesn't die, and a man who kisses me when he's grumpy." He snorted. "I'm never grumpy." She grinned and kissed him anyway. The storm didn't last, but the memories did. The world outside changed. Empires rose and fell, but Nevia's sanctuary grew. Years later, a visitor arrived, tall, cloaked, unarmed. He stood at the sanctuary's edge, uncertain. Nevia walked out to meet him, barefoot as always. "You look like her," the man said. "I am her," Nevia replied. "But I don't answer to that name anymore." "Then who are you now?" She turned, and Kalen stepped beside her, arm around her waist. "I am sovereign of no one," she said. "But I'm free." And Kalen, looking at the family they'd built, whispered, "She's also mine." The visitor left. On a quiet morning, with mist curling around the stones, Nevia knelt in the center of the sanctuary. Around her, children played, strangers laughed, the wounded were healed, and no one wore crowns. Kalen joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "No," she whispered. "Because I never truly lived, until I crashed into you." His forehead touched hers. "You made your choice. And I'll make it again every day." She took his hand and raised it above them. "By my own right, by no law but love, I name you, Kalen, my star-bound king." They didn't need witnesses. But the forest heard. And it sang.